Configuration of a routed port is relatively straightforward. Conceptually, it's more difficult than the config. We do want routing to be turned on. You'd go to an interface. Now, by default, it is considered a switch port. And being a switch port means spanning tree protocol, trunking capability, access port capability. When you do the command no switch port, that says you are now a routed port. You behave more like a router than anything else. You can have an IP address, and this is the complete config. You could also tie in things like an access control list here or whatever you might typically do on a router interface. Let's do this in our own environment to get some exposure to this config, some additional exposure. So this is going to be applicable between DSW1 and R1 and DSW2 and R2. And at the end of this, I want to be able to ping back and forth between DSW1 and R1 and DSW2 and R2. So I'm going to look at my interfaces and I'm going to do show int GI10 switch port. That's a very telling command for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the switch port on this one. No switch port. I'm going to redo that command. Same show command, but now very short output, very succinct output. Now I'm not sure what IP addresses I want to put on here, so let's figure that out by doing a do show CDP neighbors detail, actually entry R1. Do show CDP entry R1. That's the IP address that I want to match in terms of the subnet. I want something unique. So I'm going to do IP address 10.1.1. I could have logged into R1. I have reachability to that. I could just clicked on that. But this is what we would do in the real world. I'm going to say DSW1 is going to be .3. And I'm going to assume a 24-bit mask. I, in fact, know that. And now I want to ping R1. I want to ping R1. Let's ping ourselves. Ping R1. Let's go to R1, see if there's any interesting thing going on in this interface. You know what? It actually looks at that like that is going to the wrong. But I did get CDP information. Got some interesting wiring going on in the background. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to move that IP address int I just had the IP address configured on the wrong interface. I was able to solve that. Just didn't match my topological documentation. But we got it to work. Job done. Oh. And let's validate. Yeah, it wasn't over the 2.0 interface. You can see that. Wow, wow, wow. It was over the 1/0 interface. Okay. Super. So now let's go over to DSW2. Solve that challenge. I'm really happy about that. You know, minor things like IP addressing challenges can be a real problem. So I'm going to do the same thing, and this is what it would take to configure this topology. No switch port, IP address. I do know the subnet here is going to be 10.1.23. Let's go to R2. Ping. We're looking good. Okay, so we have our connectivity between DSW2 and R2 and DSW1 and R1. Good. I was just a little perturbed by the loss of that, but I had forgotten that I had just flapped that interface because the switch port command removal is pretty significant. So routed ports, definitely between your distribution layer and your core, which R1 and R2 are essentially core layer devices for me. Between DSW1 and DSW1 and DSW2, that's for a very different implementation of the switch block. Some topologies do work that way, but not the topology that this course is built on. So know how to configure your layer 3 links, and you really are getting to a place where you can successfully deploy multi-layer switches.